Good evening and welcome everybody to the Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube channel and Instagram. We appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight, and this is the first Canada West football show here on the Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube channel. Super excited to have a guest be joining us here shortly, but just to give you guys a little rundown of what to expect here from now on. Planning on doing a Canada West football show once a week during the season. Planning to have on multiple guests throughout the year. The plan as of now is probably to have on, a player from, the one of the six different teams throughout the conference. Maybe once every other week or something like that. We have actually lined up next week's guest. We will save that for the end of the show, so stay tuned for that to hear who's joining us next week. But tonight, Canada West sideline reporter and CTB contributor Matt Young will be joining us here shortly. Matt joined us, I believe, a little bit, I think last spring sometime, around combine season, if I'm not mistaken, to talk some Canada West, some youth sports as well. So Matt actually helps me out with the Canada West weekly picks that we've been doing, week number 2. So we've been doing them the last 2 weeks to start the season with Matt Young, myself, Connor O'Neill from Canadian Football Perspective, and Gordon Randall from Crown Gridiron Nation. So, yeah, just adding some more Canada West content onto the channel here. Wanting to do a little bit of a weekly show, where, like I said, going to be joined by some guests. Kind of a 30-minute time frame. Our timeline is the kind of the aim for these videos every week. We'll kind of recap, if that's what you want to call it, last week's action. Talk a little bit about maybe what stood out to us, and then a little preview, a little sneak peek into this week's action. So as you guys can see, Saskatchewan at Regina, Calgary at UBC, Calgary at Alberta, and Manitoba at UBC. So Matt will be joining us here shortly. We'll go over last week's action. Interested to hear what Matt has to say. And then I'll get Matt's thoughts on this week's action. There's some other good matchups, especially out here in BC with Manitoba traveling out here. 1-0 Manitoba traveling to the 0-1 UBC. Should be interested to see if UBC can get a victory or if Manitoba can walk into UBC and get a victory on their home field. So should be very interesting week once again. It was a fantastic start to the week, to the season there in week 1 with if I guess if you want to call it them upsets, but I think just the parity level in the Canada West is maybe you lean towards not saying that some of these games were upsets. I'm talking about with Alberta and UBC. Obviously, you could maybe say Manitoba upset Saskatchewan. I think that's probably fair to say, but Regina as well getting a victory over Calgary, I think, was an interesting outcome to see last week. Interested to hear what Matt Young has to say here momentarily when he joins us. I believe he's backstage. Let's see if Matt. Thanks for joining us. How you doing? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you good. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you coming in loud and clear. Awesome. To appreciate you for joining us, man. I know it's a busy time right now.
Absolutely. No, always got time for you, and this is great. Love talking college football. Love talking some Canada West football, and we had a great week 1. We're gonna have another great week 2, and lots of things going on, and we got some teams that are making some noise and some different things happening. So let's get right to it. We got college football weekend coming up for the second straight week, of course, and lots of good action going on.
Yes, well said, man. So, as I was saying, I'm just giving the people a little bit of rundown what to expect on the show. Gonna kind of, I guess if you want to call it, recap quickly last week's action. We'll go game by game, just kind of get your thoughts quickly, Matt, and then we'll jump into this week's action, get kind of what you're curious and seeing that's going to be on the field here tomorrow night. So let's get back into it. Manitoba, as I was saying, if you want to call it an upset Saskatchewan last week. I think they've kind of come out of the gates here and shown that maybe this could be a different Manitoba team. I know they're a more veteran team than they have been here in the last previous years. So I was interested to see that outcome. But after being able to watch the game back and stuff, they were able to get out to that, I believe, 21-0 lead before Saskatchewan kind of even really knew what was happening, and almost a little bit shell shocked there. They were able to start to claw their way back and I think make things interesting there. The final score, I believe, 37-24 looks a little bit more lopsided, and I think the game ended up kind of being there in the middle. But overall, just an impressive victory for Manitoba, I think, to start their year and build in the right direction. I'm interested talking about that game. What jumped out to you, Matt?
Well, initially, when I looked at that game, a lot of people were picking the Huskies. I had initially thought Manitoba might be able to squeak this one out. And the reason why is because when you look at the Manitoba Bisons, you're right. That is a very experienced team. They got a very good quarterback who has plenty of playing experience in Jackson Tashinsky. And you got a pretty high octane offense. You know, when you talk about guys like A.K. Gassama and you talk about guys like Braden Stubbs, I mean, these guys have been playing together for a while. They got a pretty good offensive line that's also quite big with Vaccaro in there. So, I mean, I think this Manitoba team is actually going to surprise some people. And I said that to some folks. Initially, I thought Manitoba, then I kind of shifted back to Saskatchewan. But I said to everybody, you know, don't sleep on the Manitoba Bisons this year. You know, they're playing for a coach that's in his last season. You know, players know that there might be a little motivation there. And the game kind of unfolded a little bit like last season. You know, if you remember the Huskies, you know, they had a big comeback against Manitoba. There was a big comeback in that game between Manitoba and Saskatchewan last year. And Manitoba, of course, ended up losing that game. It was the Huskies. But you know, when you look at these two teams that play, I think this Manitoba Bison's offense is going to be very hard to contain. You're going to have a good secondary, and you're going to have a good linebacking core to keep up with this offense. And Jackson Tashinsky can run. You know, 62 yards on the ground. You had over 100 yards, I believe, for Braden Stubbs. So I mean, when you look at that offensive package, I'm not surprised that they put up that many points. And Manitoba's 1-0, and I think they're going to be in the upper echelon of Canada West this year.
Yeah, I think something that jumps out to me after kind of being able to watch the game and then look at the numbers and the box scores and stuff like that. Manitoba, they put up 37 points, but they didn't really have an explosive outcome offensively. I believe Tajinski here, as I look down at the numbers, 12 of 20, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns, very modest afternoon. Was able to be explosive there early on and take advantage of some pretty good field position there that they had in the first quarter. I want to say they only had 125 yards with the 3 touchdowns there in the first quarter. Getting the ball, I think, in Saskatchewan's territory almost every drive to start the game. As you mentioned, A.K. Kasama, very explosive threat for them. I believe scored on their second play, I think, offensively from the game. Was able to kind of give them a big boost to start the game. And then, as you mentioned as well, playing for Brian Dobie, I think, would energize any team, any program. They put out a little, kind of his, I think, pregame speech to the team, and was a very, very motivating speech, and very had me wanting to run through a wall for him. So I could only imagine his players and stuff like that. So as we shift to Saskatchewan a little bit, a guy that obviously Anton jumped out for me, over 300 yards as well, but Nick Wiebe, obviously the second Wiebe now, I think that's came and played for that program. I think he had over 200 yards, I think 11 catches, something like that, was able to get a touchdown as well. Any thoughts from Saskatchewan's perspective on the game?
Well, I think if you're the Saskatchewan Huskies, the one thing you learn is you got to play smart football, and you can't give up 21-0 leads early on. I mean, Scott Flory does not like that. I mean, he likes to see a disciplined team. He doesn't like to see penalties, and he likes to see a team play good, hard-nosed football and clean up the mistakes. So I think for the Saskatchewan Huskies, this is still a team that has some good pieces, right? I mean, you look at guys like you said, Wiebe, you got Rhett Favre, you got Anton Amundred, who has experience, and he's got a pretty strong arm. So that Huskies team is a good team, and Scott Flory's a very, very good coach, and they got some pieces on defense too. So I think for the Saskatchewan Huskies, it's making sure that you come out to a strong enough start and don't dig yourself into such a huge hole early, because you go down 21-0 in the first quarter, it's going to be very tough to come back no matter who you're against. So I think for the Huskies, they got to play 2 halves of football, and that, of course, is the first half and the second half.
All right, so let's get into last year's Hardy Cup rematch that took place here in Week 1. University of Alberta taking on the University of British Columbia out here in UBC once again, and was a super interesting game. I think going back to rewatch that one as well, seeing as that I was kind of caught up being at Touchdown Pacific this weekend. Thankful for Canada West and everything they're able to put together with their streaming services, Canada West TV and stuff like that, being able to watch the games back on demand, stuff like that. But I think that game was much closer than the final outcome as well. Being able to watch that back, UBC taking a lead into the halftime, and University of Alberta kind of pulling away there at the end. But my biggest concern, I think, if you're a UBC fan, supporter, is just the inability that they weren't able to stop the run. Obviously, Matthew Peterson is Canada West Player of the Year, and Alberta's kind of built their offense off that run game, but I think very concerning with Manitoba coming to town this upcoming week. But any thoughts from that Alberta and UBC game in week 1?
Well, when you look at the numbers and you look at that running game that Alberta has, they got a hulking offensive line, Matthew Peterson, and they are going to be another dynamic offense. I mean, Eli Hetlinger, and I've coined the term, the Book of Eli. Get ready, he's coming. He had a great game, 77% completion rate. I think he was 17 for 22. I mean, that was a team. That was a tale of two halves, right? It was close for most of the first half. You come out in the second half, Alberta starts to blow it out wide open. And I think the Alberta Golden Bears, that's really a two-horse monster there. They can pass and they can run really, really, really well. And that's an experienced team as well. Receiving wise, you got Chevy Thomas, you got Colby Herford. I mean, that's a team that is primed to go on another potential run towards the Hardy Cup. And this time, I mean, for Alberta's sake, obviously they hope that they win it. So, and on defense too, I mean, Jonathan Giustini, I thought, and again, I was looking at this and I was debating back and forth. I mean, Alberta, UBC, Alberta. I think that Alberta Golden Bears team, you probably would give them the edge by a hair over most of the teams in Canada West. But I'm not surprised. Look, we've seen them put up those kind of numbers rushing the football last year. And teams, if you're going to beat Alberta, you're going to have to stop Matthew Peterson, and you're going to have to somehow keep Eli Hetlinger contained and get some pressure on him because he is going to be, I think, lights out for a lot of the season.
Yeah, I think the thing that impresses me most about that Alberta rushing attack is that Matthew Peterson is able to be so effective in his touches that he's given. But I believe they've kind of rotated. I believe last year was it Jonathan Rosary kind of split some time, saw some carries, and then a guy that I liked this past week was that Oshinabe, I believe, number 22. He was able to chip in, be very effective when his number was called.
Yep.
I think he had 8 carries, 73 yards, 9.1 yards per carry, and a touchdown to chip on. To add on to what Matthew Peterson was able to do. So I think they have another kind of 1-2 punch there in the backfield with, a Canada West Player of the Year, and then another quality backup that's able to fill in and not really be a backup, kind of fill in and keep that same level of play when Peterson's able to get a blow on the sideline, which is, I think, even scarier for opposing opponents that are, having to face a fresher Matthew Peterson in the third, fourth quarter when they're really able to, what they did, grind on UBC and really grind that game out and kind of chokehold, suffocate UBC there in the second half. I'm glad you mentioned Jonathan Giustini, man. What a ball player he is, hey. And I think that the thing that impresses me most is that he's kicker as well. I think he nailed a 48-yarder, if I'm not mistaken. Was able to have an interception. So just a guy that's all over the field. I believe he was drafted this past season, so spent a little bit of time in a CFL training camp. I'm sure learned some valuable lessons, stuff like that. But that Alberta team is very dangerous and very scary. And I think they kind of are just starting to hit their stride now after seeing what they're capable of last year. And I think, for my money's sake, they probably have the best offense in the Canada West as of now. Still early in the year, a lot to still prove and stuff like that. But I think they mentioned on the broadcast 4 or 5 of those offensive linemen returning. As you mentioned, some of those guys in the receiving corps, Chevy Thomas, Eli Hetlinger, a lot of talented weapons there for Alberta. So for UBC, like I was kind of talking to a few guys there in the chat, going back and forth with kind of thinking of who was I going to pick between Manitoba and UBC. I definitely had a lot more confidence going with UBC this week after rewatching the game, seeing that it was a little bit closer than the final score indicates. That being said, definitely nervous for Manitoba's rushing attack with Braden Stubbs. Even I believe it's Noah Anderson who also chips in there for Manitoba as well. Can be an effective kind of bruising back, and interested to see how kind of that dictates, but I'm sure we'll get to that when we talk about that matchup. Is there any thoughts from UBC's perspective before we move on, Matt?
Well, I think from UBC right now, you want to shore up that defense. I mean, allowing Alberta to come out there in the second half and put up the points they did. I mean, I think Blake Nill and company have to start looking at that defense and saying, okay, where were the holes? How did they get beat? And this is all about really just looking at game film. Week 1 can sometimes be a bit of a crapshoot, but for Alberta to walk in there, on the road in a Hardy Cup rematch, and I mean, they were up by 22 points until late in the fourth quarter when I think it was a late touchdown by UBC from Sam Davenport that made it 42-28. I think for the UBC Thunderbirds, they got to make sure that that defense is solid because they're going to be facing again some teams that can really throw the ball and really run the ball. And I think for UBC, the question is, 28 points is enough to keep you in a game, but then you got to hope your defense can step up. And Alberta was able to kind of very methodically get down the field, and I think that's what UBC is going to have to work on this week.
Yeah, and I think it was good offensively. We saw Garrett Rooker kind of look similar to what he did last year, 25-34, 375 yards, 2 touchdowns, the 1 interception. Isaiah Knight, obviously, another promising back in the conference, 11 for 89 yards and a touchdown as well. So their offense could be explosive at times as well, but as you mentioned, got to be able to get some stops there and keep your offense in the game. So last but not least on week 1 slate was Regina upsetting Calgary. I wasn't able to watch this one out of the other previous 2 games, but from seeing a few of the kind of articles and stuff like that, watching the highlights, it seemed like this one was more of a defensive kind of battle. I think it was about 13-2 there at half, 16-2 after the third quarter. I guess shout out and praying for, I believe it's Owen Seaben, Regina Rams quarterback. I think left the game with a neck injury. Looked like a pretty scary play when he kind of got caught up there and his neck bent backwards. So I know, I believe, is it Noah Pelche came in and finished the game for the Regina Rams.
Yeah.
I think both quarterbacks accounted for their majors there, rushing in both touchdowns for Regina. Calgary attempted a late fourth quarter comeback, I think, with 14 points there in the fourth quarter, but fell short and probably was a little bit too little too late there trying to make a comeback on Regina. Regina was able to pull it out and I think start their season off on the right foot. I think they've been building for a better, more competitive year. I talked a little bit about with Connor, who we're doing the weekly picks with last week doing the preview, that Regina's been in a lot of these games the last few years and just found ways to lose or just hasn't done enough to win. So I think starting off with a game like this, they're able to get a win. Hopefully Owen's all right, and it's nice that they have the depth that they do. I also talked about that with Connor, that they have probably 3 quality guys in that quarterback room with Noah Pelche, a guy like Trey Jones, CJFL veteran. So it's nice to have when you can have depth like that. But were you able to watch this game at all, Matt? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you know what? I was able to, and when I look at that game, I saw a team like the Regina Rams that seem a bit more put together than Calgary. Calgary's offense struggled. I mean, they did. They could not really get a whole lot going on the ground. Britain was, I think, below 50% completion rate in that game. So, I mean, I think Calgary struggled, and that's not to take credit from the Regina Rams. I mean, they played pretty well. It was a defensive struggle for a chunk of that game. We do hope, obviously, Owen Seaben does make a full recovery, but it looks like Noah Pelche is likely to get the start this week when we talk about this week's games, and he's a pretty good quarterback. He's solid. He played for most of 2022. He got injured, I think it was in week 3 or 4 last season, but he's a solid guy that's coming in to take over for Owen Seaben. But I think if you're the Rams, hey, you're happy. You know what? You want to know, again, you went in on the road and you defeated a Calgary team at McMahon Stadium. Now you gear up for the rivalry against the Saskatchewan Huskies, and I think Mark McConkey's got to be pretty happy right now.
And so to shift to Calgary a little bit here, we talked about earlier, week 1's kind of being sometimes an outlier, sometimes weird stuff happens with outcomes and stuff like that. Calgary, obviously, with the new regime, I believe Ryan Sheehan is taking over this year for Calgary. How much of it do you think maybe you can credit that to, a new kind of scheme in there, players learning how, what the kind of the standard is for Calgary now, and hopefully maybe there's a little bit of better days here for Calgary. Last year we saw them get out to a little bit of a tougher start. They were able to turn things around, be competitive down the stretch, and almost get into the playoffs there to end the season. So from a Calgary perspective, what are your kind of thoughts there for them going forward?
I think it's just, I think they got to work out some of the kinks, right? They've got to get everybody on the same page. It wasn't quite as crisp. It's not as smooth as you'd like when you look at the offense and making sure that your quarterback and wide receivers are clicking, that your offensive linemen are getting squared up on their blocks and making sure that everything is sort of running like a well-oiled machine. So I think Calgary, it's all about getting things together and all about trying to just sort of interlock the pieces tight enough so that that offense can start moving the ball a little bit better. And I think Calgary, you're right. You talked about last year, they were off to a bit of a slow start. I think they won their last 3 games and almost made a run for the playoffs, actually. So this is a Calgary team that once they get organized, I think they'll be good. I mean, they got a new coach in there, right? And so that always adds a different dynamic. But look, I think this is a Calgary team that they competed, and they showed that they can compete. And I think if they can get things together in practice, have a good week of practice, and sort of get those chips down where they need to be, and get that offense moving, just obviously a little bit more, get it honed out a bit. I think that Calgary team could be a team that could do some damage.
The guy that I think they felt the missing presence from is, obviously they lost Gob Dang this past offseason, was signed with UBC and then ended up signing with the Langley Rams in junior football. I think was a dynamic player. One of the guys I really enjoyed watching Canada West action last year and tuning into Calgary games because of how much of a playmaker he was and a dynamic one. So I think he's definitely missed in Calgary, and hopefully they can find a new one there down the stretch here. So, Matt, that kind of ends last week's action. Let's get into this week's action, talk a little bit about kind of what your thoughts are on a few of these games. We won't keep you much longer. I know you got to get out of here. So, let's start with Saskatchewan at Regina. I'm not too sure you're going to be at this game at all, Matt. Are you covering this one?
I'm not going to be covering this one. I'm going to be calling a couple of games starting in a couple of weeks, but I'm going to be watching this one for sure because obviously Saskatchewan Regina, that's a huge rivalry in college football in Canada. So when you look at this game right now, you got a pretty good Rams team that beat the Calgary Dinos. You got a Saskatchewan Huskies team that sort of gave it up kind of in the first quarter against the Manitoba Bisons and couldn't quite complete the comeback. I'm looking to see if this Saskatchewan Huskies team can get it together for week 2, and I'm looking to see if Anton Amundred and Nick Weeb and Daniel
Right.
Weeb and
Yeah.
you got
Riker
Rhett
Frank.
Maver and everybody out there, right? You got to try and make sure that again, it's kind of like Calgary. Make sure everything's crisp. Make sure you move the ball. Don't turn it over. Don't make any mistakes. Don't take penalties. And I think that this Saskatchewan Huskies team can rebound. I mean, they're facing a Regina Rams team. You don't have Oben Sieben, but you do have Noah Pelche, who's pretty good. This is a quarterback that in 2022 people might forget in his rookie year, he took the Regina Rams and helped lead them to the playoffs. So I mean, Regina's got certainly some confidence at quarterback and Noah Pelche, but I'm looking for the Huskies. I give them the edge just by the hair against the Regina Rams. Scott Flory is absolutely going to be drilling it in practice that they can't, as you mentioned earlier, give up the short field and things like that. So I would say this is going to be a tough battle. I think it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be a runaway for either side. Expect the defenses to really step up early. And look for that Huskies receiving core to try and make a bit of a larger impact. Anton Amundred played fairly well, unfortunately against the Manitoba Bisons, but couldn't complete the comeback. I think the Saskatchewan Huskies team is going to be out. But hey, it's always a good game. It's rarely a blowout when the Rams and the Huskies get together to play. So I mean, I think this is going to be a good one. You got the Prairie Challenge, having some tailgate parties beforehand, so that's going to be a real party atmosphere in Regina, and I'm excited to see that one.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this game goes as well. I think, we put out our picks this morning, as I've already mentioned, and the Regina Instagram was quick to, leave a little comment there down below with a little sleeping emoji. And, I commented back, I don't think anybody's sleeping on Regina by any means. I think just from our perspective, not to speak for you guys, but I think we're just probably a little bit higher on Saskatchewan. I would expect Regina to come out, compete in this game, keep it a close game, as you just mentioned. And in football games, if it's a close game, anything can happen down the stretch, right? Weird things happen with that egg-shaped ball. It bounces some weird ways and stuff like that, especially in the Canadian game. I also said I'd be happy to be proven kind of wrong from a Regina perspective. I was able to sit down with Josh Donnelly this past offseason, stuff like that. Really like their program. Sat down with Jackson Song back there in kind of combine season as well. So enjoy their program, and we would be happy to be wrong. But I too think that Saskatchewan will come out with a victory. Regina already having a victory on the season. Not that they're gonna come into this game laid back, but I think Saskatchewan will be the more desperate team coming in to try to get their first victory here on the season. So
Oh, I
interested to see how
agree.
this.
I think
Yeah.
Saskatchewan is absolutely going to be desperate. They do not want to happen to them what happened against Manitoba. They allowed 200 yards on the ground, and you can bet that that front defensive four for Saskatchewan is going to be ready for this Regina Rams team this week. And Scott Flory is going to have them very motivated. On the other side, I mean, when you look at the Regina Rams and you think of guys like Jackson Sombach and Chopper Hippie and Cameron Ma, I mean, they're going to be ready too. I think it wouldn't surprise me if this game starts off a little bit like the UBC Alberta game, where it's a little, it's back and forth, dink and dunk. It's largely defensive, but and somebody maybe comes away with it in the third quarter. But look out! I think the Huskies are going to come out playing very desperate. They're going to be going into unfriendly territory, I guess you could say, and they're going to want to come out with a win. But I would love to be surprised by Regina. I think Regina can do it. And I think this Rams team, Mark McConkey's a great coach, and he knows how to get through to his players. I've talked to him many times, and he's very, very cerebral, and knows the game, and finds little intricacies that some coaches may not see. So I mean, you got some great coaches on both sides. This is going to be a fun one to watch. I probably give it to the Huskies just by a hair, but man, I think this is going to be a really close game, and the Prairie Challenge is always fun to watch.
Yes, it is. So now let's go to the next game. One of the best rivalries in sports, the Battle of Alberta.
Oh
Calgary
yeah.
traveling to Alberta this week. Should be another good matchup. I think, as I just mentioned about Saskatchewan, Calgary will probably be coming into this game like the more desperate team. I think Alberta is just a little bit better, probably why I'm going with them this week. But maybe, Matt, give us a little bit of, maybe a recipe of how Calgary could, upset this one and maybe pull off a victory here this weekend.
Well, I'm for Calgary. They've got to, and we mentioned it earlier. They've got to keep this offense in check, and I think they're going to have to play very good coverage, especially on the receiving core for the Alberta Golden Bears, and they're going to have to find a way to stop Matthew Peterson, no doubt. If they can hold him down and hold that running attack down, and then their secondary can play tight zone or man coverage, I think that they have a chance. That Alberta team is so dynamic. They have a hulking offensive line. So I think for Calgary, I mean, half the battle is again, it's just making sure you don't turn it over, don't take too many penalties. Make sure that you're making smart decisions with the football, and that you're not, if you can avoid taking a sack, avoid doing it. And I think Calgary can compete against Alberta, and I think perhaps that game in week one was just an aberration offensively. We know that they can play better than that. You're right. The loss of Gob Dang and some others have probably maybe set them back a little bit. But again, I think it comes down, if Calgary's going to win this game, it's because their defense played really, really well. I think it's because they hold Alberta, the Alberta's offense in check, and they don't let them run up the score to 42 points. I think that's how Calgary can win this game. Good disciplined football and special teams. You get a big play on special teams here or there. Maybe it's a big run back, maybe it's a block punt, but if they can play good, solid, disciplined football, I think they can give Alberta for a run for their money. And by the way, just another chip on both of their shoulders. You're playing Alberta, right? You're playing Alberta. You're playing the Alberta Golden Bears. If you're the Calgary Dinos, you don't want to beat anybody more than Alberta. And same for the Alberta Golden Bears. You're playing Calgary. You don't want to beat anybody more than the Calgary Dinos. So, I mean, when you look at that game, if you want a recipe for how Calgary is going to stop the Alberta Golden Bears, their defense has to come up big, and they've got to get pressure on Eli Hetlinger. They can't just let him sit back there and pick him apart, because he'll do that. They've got to get to him. They've got to put pressure on him. They've got to hurry him. And if they can do that, they got a chance.
Yeah, I think for me, this is another one where, I think the train just keeps on moving. The train being Alberta, with them kind of continuing their momentum from last season into this year. And another one with Calgary, I have a few ties and friends on the program there, with Steen Rasmussen getting an interception there last week for Calgary, defensive back for them. So I would love to be proven wrong this week, but I think just Alberta, like I said, I think the train just continues to keep moving. They are a dynamic team, and very dangerous on both sides of the ball. So lastly, a matchup that I am very excited to watch, and super excited by. I think it's a 7 o'clock kick, if I'm not mistaken, out here Pacific time. But
You going to the
really,
game?
I'm not, unfortunately. I'm not. I wish I was. I'm going back to Vancouver for the BC Lions next week, unfortunately. So just not able to make it work with Touchdown Pacific and this one being in the middle. Really bummed out though, to be honest, Matt. I was actually at this game last year when Manitoba came to town. It was Sawyer Thiessen behind center there for Manitoba instead of Jackson Tajinski. That was when he was a little bit banged up. UBC won pretty big, but not being without your starting quarterback has, I think, a big factor in that one. So this one, I am super excited to see how UBC responds after going down to 0-1, and then how Manitoba continues to build on their momentum that they've started to create here early on in the season. What are your thoughts on this dynamic matchup here early on?
Well, I think this is an interesting one because for Manitoba, I don't know if you can count on getting 200 yards on the ground every game. But I will say this: I think for the UBC Thunderbirds, Jarrell Cummings and Jason Soriano are going to have to be on top of their game, and they're going to be very, very busy, hanging on to guys like Ege Gasama and Braden Stubbs. I mean, I think that they are very, very key for the UBC Thunderbirds to again not allow Manitoba to put up the points that they did against Saskatchewan. And I think that UBC has to force Manitoba to start some of their drives deep. Again, Manitoba had many drives that they were starting upfield against Saskatchewan. I think that's going to be a very interesting matchup. And I think for UBC, again, it's the defense that's got to come up. They allowed 42 points against Alberta. You can bet Blake Nill was not happy after seeing the score in that one, and especially how Alberta, kind of for most of the second half, really kind of dominated that game. I think for the Manitoba Bisons, it's so interesting because Jackson Tashinsky is one of the better running quarterbacks in the league, and UBC has to contain that. And the thing is that Tashinsky, he's not afraid to run. I mean, he's shown that he's fine to run the ball, and he's got some speed to him. He put 62 yards on the ground himself in week 1. So I think for Manitoba, the dynamic is one, obviously, I mean, their offense it looks pretty good. Their offense can move the ball, certainly. Yes, they did it a chunk of times on a short field, but they can definitely do it. That Manitoba defense, can they stop Garrett Rooker? Can they stop Sam Davenport, right? Can they stop that connection? Because Garrett Rooker still threw the ball for, I think it was over 350 yards. So if
Yep.
Rooker's going to get his yards. He's going to get the ball in the air. I think for Manitoba, the defense has got to find a way to stop that. I have Manitoba in this one again, just by a hair. These are so close games to pick right now. I mean, there's just nobody who's really, really good or really, really bad. I think UBC absolutely can win this game. It's almost a coin toss at this point. But this is a big one for Manitoba. If they can go 2-0 and kind of assert themselves near the top of Canada West, that is huge. And again, this is Brian Dobie's last season, and you can bet that players that have played for him for a few years are going to want to give their best effort. I think there's a lot on the line just sentimentally for Manitoba right now, and I know a lot of people are picking UBC, and absolutely justifiably so. This is just going to be a fun one to watch. Sometimes it's hard to pick these games and throw out a prediction out there, and I find it difficult too. But right now, I think this is going to be a fascinating one to watch, and I'm interested to see the Bisons. They look like the real deal. I think on paper
Yeah.
they really are. They have a real chance to prove it this weekend, and I think for UBC, you don't want to fall 0-2. They're going to come out very desperate. I think just like the Huskies are going to come out desperate this week against the Rams. And again, that defense, Blake Nill, he knows how to motivate guys, and knows how to make adjustments. And you can bet they're going to be watching the game film against Manitoba to find a way to stop Jackson Tashinsky and company from moving the football.
Yeah, and they talked a little bit about it on the broadcast copy from the Canada West TV as well about the addition of Wayne Harris. I believe he's coaching linebackers there for UBC. Obviously, former University of Calgary Dinos coach, and that kind of, I think, just adds to the fuel on the defensive side of the football and trying to figure things out, limit some of these scoring possessions and stuff, and being able to give their offense back to football. I think one quick note that we actually I forgot about kind of mentioning there in the game recap, but Sam Davenport, as you mentioned, kind of picked up where he left off last season. I think he was over 100 yards, but Mark Webb had himself I don't know if I want to say a good game, but a great first quarter. I think he was out to over 104 receptions for 165, I think is what he finished with. I'd be interested to know what his first kind of half stats were. He had a huge play there to give the UBC Thunderbirds a touchdown. early in the first quarter, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was a 70+ yarder, and he was another added weapon. I think UBC is very lucky in terms of having some of those pieces that they have. Jason Soriano was a guy that split time playing receiver and kind of defensive back last year, has made the move to full-time defensive back because of how many of the weapons that they have on the offensive side of the ball. So I agree with you wholeheartedly, or for sure, about this game could be a coin flip, and Manitoba can win, UBC can win. I think it comes down for me the desperation factor that I think Saskatchewan will play with. I think UBC will play with. And I think it's just another reason why people should be tuning into Canada West. You never know who's going to be winning these matchups on a weekly basis.
Absolutely.
And I think this is going to muddy things even more. I think how many teams are going to get to 1-1. Saskatchewan's able to pull off a victory. UBC, I think it'll be 4 teams will be 1-1 after 2 weeks, and just adds to the drama I think that'll be this season. So, Matt, that'll kind of conclude our little first Canada West football show. Matt and I's plan will be to kind of do one of these every week where we kind of recap a little bit of last week's action and then preview this upcoming week's game. A little bit of a 40-minute video to put out there for you guys to get ready for this week's game and kind of hear about what happened throughout the week. I know people maybe in certain fan bases regions are only able to watch a game or two throughout the week and maybe want to get filled in on the rest of the action. So Matt, thank you for joining me. But how was that?
Absolutely.
You enjoy talking a little bit of Canada West football?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, for sure. And by the way, enjoy. You going to the BC Lions game out there in Vancouver, right?
Yes, next week.
Have fun at that. I'm actually planning to be out there myself, possibly for Grey Cup, so I'm going to be out there as well. And we're going to talk a lot of college football over the next few weeks, and let's have some fun this season and see some stars of the CFL tomorrow. Let's see them on the field today. It's nice to see guys like that blossom. It's always good to see a CFL player who you remember playing at the University of Alberta or UBC or Manitoba. So there's lots of great talent out there. I mean, you know what? One guy I got to talk about for Manitoba, Nick Thomas. I failed to mention him on defense. I mean, he's another big part of that Manitoba Bison's team. He's a great story down there in Winnipeg. So there's some great games coming up. We're going to talk a lot of college football, and it's going to be fun.
BC boy Nick Thomas. I
there
love
you
to
go.
hear it. And if you come to Grey Cup, let me know for sure. Would love to meet up with you.
Oh, absolutely.
I already got my tickets.
Absolutely.
I think back to the days when I was a little bit younger, and I guess it must have been 2011 there when Vanier Cup was the same weekend as Grey Cup. I was actually able to go to the Vanier Cup that year when it was McMaster
McMaster Marauders.
Yeah, but McMaster, I forget who they're playing now off the top of my head, but that was the famous the quarterback there that he hurdled the guy and he had a little bit of trouble issues when he got to the CFL. His name's escaping me right now, which is a little bit bad, but that was a fantastic game. One of the better U Sports games I think is kind of brought up throughout history and stuff like that. A very thrilling game. Went into overtime, was won on a walk-off kick. So super cool for me to kind of get my first action of U Sports that way. And I really wish that they kind of would bring that back of the, Grey Cup, Vanier Cup in the same weekend, kind of really celebrate Canadian football all in one. But would definitely love to link up with you, Matt, and hopefully maybe share a beverage or something like that during Grey Cup week. So
you got it.
And would definitely meet, I guess, in person. So for those that aren't aware, we did release our weekly picks here this morning on both Instagram and Twitter. So go check that out. Let us know who you guys are picking this week. As I mentioned earlier, we will be having a guest on every other week. So every second week on the show, Matt and I are having a guest on from one of the 6 teams throughout the conference. So next week, we'll be having AK Gasama join us from the University of Manitoba Bisons. And then, into week 4, we'll have a little bit of a break and we'll get another guest there in week 5. So it should be a good time. Hopefully get to, introduce you guys to a few of these personalities, some of these players throughout the conference. And then Matt and I will be here on a weekly basis, hopefully talking some Canada West. I know Matt's a busy guy, so if he's not able to join us, we can hopefully get a fill-in or second.
Oh, we'll try and make time. There's always time for college football.
Awesome. I appreciate it so much, Matt. So that'll kind of end things today. Matt, is there any final thoughts for the people there?
You know what? I would just say if you can get out, watch a game, do so, and check them out on Canada West TV. I mean, a great production, and you're also, you're seeing a lot of high quality football out there. I mean, there are even guys that have come up from the U.S. and played Canada West football. So I mean, I encourage everybody get out, have a look. You know what? If you're especially if you're in Regina or Saskatoon, that Prairie Challenge is always huge. The Battle of Alberta, we got it going on this weekend. So I would say this: get or Canada West TV. Get Canada West TV. Have a look. Myself, I'll be calling a few games this year. We got Darren Dupont doing some games as well, and it's going to be fun. And you know what? They work really, really hard. They put on a pretty good production. So and supporting college football here in Canada as well. So that's what I encourage everybody. And it's going to be a good time. You know, we got some stars. Right? We got Sam, the reception man down in UBC, Sam Davenport. Right? We got AK Gassama turning up the gas. Right? AK Gassama. Right? We got the Book of Eli Hetlinger. Right? I mean, we got a lot of great superstars that are in this league that are playing college football. I don't think there's ever been a better time for Canada West football. And I encourage guys to get out there and either watch a game on Canada West TV or get out to the stadium and enjoy the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I was talking with Connor last week. He mentioned about, how lucky we are in the Canada West here, that the quarterback position too. That, starting with the quarterback position, I think only adds to the entertainment value as well. And
There
some
you
of those
go.
stars that you mentioned, AK, stuff like that, Matthew Peterson around the conference. So, lastly as well, Canada West TV. Big shout out to them and everything that they put out there that they make available. Very affordable streaming service with, I think every game is offered at, or a single game is offered at, I think it's $9 or $10 or something like that. But at a one-time payment, you can get the whole season's pass for, I think, $40, which I was able to this year. And
It
if you're
doesn't
not
get
able,
any better than that.
it
Like,
does
I
not.
mean,
How can
it
you?
absolutely is a
$40
great
for the
deal.
whole season is a great pricing point. And Friday nights, if you're not able to do some bad weather out, whatever it may be, and you're able to get all three games on a Friday or Saturday night, I think hard to complain for that price.
No, absolutely. No, it's great. So I encourage guys, Canada West TV, and you can get that. You can get the hockey too, college
Yeah.
hockey.
And
Gonna be
you're on
calling
that
some games
broadcast as
there.
well,
Yep,
aren't you,
yep.
Matt?
Be doing some Saskatchewan Huskies college hockey this year. You get basketball. So I mean, all your college sports in Canada at Canada West TV. It's fantastic. I encourage people to check it out.
And I think the best part as well, lastly on the Canada West TV, on demand feature that if you miss the game live, you can go
You
back when
can
you have some free,
rewatch it again.
yeah,
There
then
you
you can
go.
rewatch it again. You can go back when you have some free time, be able to catch it as well. So that'll do it for the first Canada West football show, and we will see you guys next time.